Welcome, gentle listener, I am Baldermort, your faithful servant. Alas, I have not been able to edit the entirety of the Reign of Iron in one go, so this entry gives the first half of the expansion, covering the Cadian Gate, the new characters and locations, and a meaty update on the perspectives and plans of the Lord of Iron, Perturabo. The subsequent entry will cover the story element of the expansion. I look forward to it intensely. Now, like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, and let's be about it. Games Workshop, Warhammer 40,000, Eye of Terror, Reign of Iron. For 10,000 years, the Eye of Terror has harbored the traitor legions. It was from within this wound in the fabric of reality that Abaddon the Despoiler's Black Legion launched each of their 13 dread crusades of vengeance. For millennia, Cadia and its defenders shielded the wider Imperium from the brunt of Abaddon's fury, holding back the tides of chaos that threatened to spill unchecked into the Segmentum Obscurus. Now, with the fortress world fallen and the energies of the Immaterium raging unchecked, Abaddon the Despoiler's victorious Black Legion leave its corrupted ruins in their wake and strike forth on conquests new. From his lair on Medrengard, the demon Primarch Perturabo has observed these unfolding events with cold and calculating malice. Now he allows himself a moment of satisfaction. The Segmentum Obscurus is vulnerable as never before, its worlds ripe for the taking. Thousands of years of methodical planning will soon come to fruition. No longer will Perturabo's Iron Warriors cede glory to others. No longer will they march to war in the service of lesser warlords. Now is the time to strike. Now begins the reign of Iron. Upon a bitter path of destruction, the heretics of the Iron Warriors have surged from the Eye of Terror against the bastions of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The opening salvos in a nightmarish scheme of conquest. Their murderous strategies have been eons in the plotting, and their corrupted siege hosts threaten to overwhelm the zealous macroclades driven into them by Mars and other forge worlds. Where such apocalyptic armies collide, annihilation on horrific scales is unleashed. The worlds of the Cadian Gate creak beneath the weight of adamantine war engines. Warsmith Cravec Mourn is come, and with him the infernal might of Medrengard. With the Iron Warrior surging out of the Eye of Terror, beleaguered and battle-weary Imperial defenders struggle to stem the gathering tide. Even the might of Mars's cybernetic cohorts may not be enough to halt the traitors' progress and bring an end to the Warsmith's sprawling campaign of conquest and fortification. Oculus Terribus. When the God Emperor of mankind arose and cast down the tyrants of old night, when amidst the ashes of their perfidy he built his golden throne as master of mankind, the eye burned in the heavens. When humanity rallied beneath the Aquila held high, and in its might marched out to claim the stars, when, for one brief heartbeat in all of time, mankind stood on the brink of glory, the eye glared down upon such works. When treachery and heresy set a torch to hope, and the Imperium burned, when ambition became mankind's pyre, and God Emperor and Diabolic Son did battle, the eye looked on eternal. When the traitorous sons fled from their defeat, and from vengeful pursuit up to the brink of madness and far beyond they plunged, the eye became their lair. It burns there still in the poisoned void. It glares its hatred ever blazing. It churns as it always has and always shall. But the traitors, in this final hour, they spill from the eye again. Suppressed extract from Prophecies of the Seer of Magnesia, stanza 987, cycle 6. The Eye of Terror. a malignant scar upon the fabric of reality light years in circumference. The Eye of Terror has festered at the heart of the Segmentum Obscurus for more than 10,000 years. A warp interstice of unparalleled size, it has provided refuge for traitors and renegades, and an invaluable staging point for their ceaseless campaigns of bloody conquest. The Eye of Terror is wreathed almost entirely in impenetrable warp storms that no fleet could hope to traverse. Any foolish enough to attempt such a journey would surely be obliterated by the rampant empiric energies of these tempests, and broken apart or hurled out of space and time. Even the outermost fringes of the Eye's sphere of corrupting influence, many light years from its heart, are subject to distortion and mutating phenomena capable of corrupting the mind and body of even the most physically hardy and headstrong traveler. These inherent dangers ensure that most sane humans keep their distance, yet they have also conspired to turn the Eye of Terror into a sanctuary for the chaos-worshipping traitor legions. A refuge for traitors. At one time, a single stable route into the Eye of Terror existed, a corridor of space in which its ever-raging warp storms were held at bay, enabling passage. This area, named for its most prominent and important star system, was the Cadian Gate. In the aftermath of the Horus Heresy, the defeated traitor legions escaped the wrath of their former allies along this path, plunging into the interior of the Eye of Terror in order to escape the wounded Imperium. The surviving traitorous Primarchs, by now corrupted beyond any hope of redemption, pursued their own esoteric goals within their newfound refuge, leaving their sons to fend for themselves. Wars raged as brother turned on brother, and once glorious armies fractured into myriad warbands as aspiring champions of chaos sought to butcher their way to glory. The Loyalists, their own military strength depleted by the bitter fighting of the Horus Heresy and the subsequent scouring, thought better of pursuing and opted instead to contain the threat. In the centuries that followed, the Cadian system, and the planet Cadia specifically, would be transformed into the most heavily fortified bastion of humanity, save for the Sol system. It would be the duty of Cadia to watch over the Eye of Terror, and to prevent the cursed traitors from striking forth to visit vengeance upon the Imperium. The Black Crusades. Despite Cadia's formidable might, traitor space marines and demons would continue to make forays into reality in search of plunder, bloodshed, and simple vengeance. Most such incursions were swiftly repelled or dispersed, the raiders driven back or destroyed by the overwhelming martial might of the Imperium. Some such invasions were more far-reaching and destructive in their effects. Greatest of them all were the Black Crusades, launched by Abaddon the Despoiler. He alone possessed the singular vision, charisma, and power to unite the disparate followers of chaos and pose a significant threat to the wider Imperium. Each Black Crusade caused untold destruction. Some saw entire worlds destroyed, others resulted in captives being seized, or ancient weapons wrestled from the clutches of the Imperium. These assaults were also precursors, strikes against arcane targets that weakened the weave of real space and wrought a fault line that, thanks to a final string of cataclysms, would split open to become the Great Rift and bring the Despoiler a victory he had labored for millennia to achieve. The 13th and largest of the Black Crusades crashed home with greater force than any before. Such was the tide of malevolence that Abaddon had drawn to his side. Even a seemingly unbroken bastion such as the Cadian system could not hope to withstand it. Wave after wave of vengeful heretics and their allies swept from the Eye to sate their bloodlust and break the Imperial's hold upon the region. By far the most grievous casualty of the fighting was Cadia itself, shattered by the impact of the Despoiler's black stone fortress, Will of Eternity. The Cicatrix Maledictum. The fall of Cadia was followed by further catastrophe. A chain of warp rifts erupted across the breadth of known space. Empiric storms drowned entire systems in corruption. This galaxy-shattering event saw the light of the Astronomicon blotted out across half the galaxy, leaving vast regions of the Emperor's realm isolated and vulnerable. The Eye of Terror lay upon the central fault line of this so-called Great Rift and expanded greatly in its aftermath, swelling to engulf much of the former Cadian Gate. The Cadian system was inundated. Cadia itself, already torn apart, saw its shattered continents overrun by demonic creatures. The neighbouring planets, Makaria and Casa Holm, were utterly obliterated, and the majority of surviving Imperial soldiers forced to flee. Tides of demons, Chaos Space Marines, and other devotees of the Dark Gods spilled like gore from its newly opened wound in reality, swelling Abaddon's forces and striking out into the wider galaxy in pursuit of fresh conquests. With the Cadian Gate forced open, there was nothing to stop them. Genesis of Terror. The decline of the Eldari is one of hubris and sorrow. Possessed of technology beyond the wit of man, their species lived lives of comfort, absent from hardship and toil. Without needing to labor, the Eldari were free to pursue their desires alone. Thus began a descent into such decadence and excess as to doom their entire species. The emotional resonance of their depravity was soon reflected in the warp, and from their curdled emotions and obsessions, Slaanesh was born. The apotheosis of this new god saw an apocalyptic eruption of psychic energy and saw the spirits of billions consumed in an instant, ripping the heart from the Eldari Empire and leaving the hideous scar upon the galaxy that would later become known as the Eye of Terror, or Ocularis Terribus. The Fall of Cadia. DC 123, Anti-Cadia Mortis, 0 hour. The first of Abaddon the Despoiler's fleets surges out of the Eye of Terror and descends upon the fortress worlds of the Cadian Gate. Above the planet Vigilatum, the Armada meets the mustered naval forces of battle fleets Corona and Sicarus. Both Imperial fleets are destroyed by the Despoiler's vessels. With their naval assets obliterated, Cadia's defenders, led by Castellan Ursakar Creed, are left with little choice but to dig in and prepare for the inevitable invasion. DC 73, Anti-Cadia Mortis, Arcane Insight. At the instigation of the Shadowseer, Selandri Veilwalker, Belisarius Call journeys to Eriad 6, a planet at the fringes of the Cadian Gate. This world was bombarded by the Black Legion during a prior Black Crusade, an act that had previously been attributed to malice rather than grand strategy. Call discovers amidst the ruins the remnants of a blackstone pylon cut down by orbital fire. The structure, he realizes, is reminiscent of those found on the surface of Cadia. The venerable Archmagos' mind races as he recalls assaults on further worlds, swiftly noting a pattern of destruction and leaping to the conclusion that Abaddon, over the course of millennia, has been targeting and eliminating these structures. Realizing the scale of the disaster that may be about to befall Cadia, the Archmagos Dominus leads his fleets to aid in their planet's defense. DC 71, Anti-Cadia Mortis, Reinforcement Summoned. Tor Garadon and the Third Company of the Imperial Fists, having just repelled a demonic assault upon their battle station, Fortress Monastery, Phalanx, hear word of Abaddon's invasion and set course for Cadia. They are far from alone. The Space Wolves, Black Templars, and dozens of other chapters dispatch warriors to join the fight. DC 45-32, Anti-Cadia Mortis, Will of Eternity. Accompanying Abaddon's fleet is the Blackstone Fortress, Will of Eternity. Its warp beam weapon, the destructive power of which was last witnessed during the Gothic War, is more than capable of scouring all life from Cadia's surface. Cognizant of the threat, agents of the Adeptus Mechanicus strive to bring their newly completed Null Array online, for only this shield can protect the planet from the Blackstone Fortress's wrath. To buy them time, Wolflord Sven Bloodhowl leads a desperate boarding action against Will of Eternity, to no avail. Just as the weapon fires, however, Casa Craft's null array flares to life, much to the surprise of its Adeptus Mechanicus operators. Only later will they come to suspect that their creation has been adapted with Xenos technologies. DC 32-20, Cadian Mortis, Assault on Casa Craft. On the continent of Cadia Secundus, the demon prince Acanthos assaults the Cadian Gates of Casa Craft, seeking to destroy the null field. At this time, even as Acanthos' warriors butcher their way through the fortress's defenders, a refrain that will become familiar in time takes hold amongst the Cadian soldiery. Cadia stands. Though Acanthos succeeds in breaching the fortress and destroying the null field, the victory is short-lived. Saint Celestine joins the fight, engaging Acanthos in a duel from which she emerges victorious. DC 17, Cadian Mortis, Dawn's Vengeance. The arrival of the Imperial Fist's colossal battle station, accompanied by a fleet of vessels, takes the traitors by surprise. Recognizing the threat posed by Will of Eternity, Torgaradon directs Phalanx's weapons against the Blackstone Fortress. Meanwhile, Sven Bloodhound and his last remaining warriors cut their way deeper into Will of Eternity's interior. Together, Imperial Fists and Space Wolves seal the Blackstone Fortress's fate. The blackened carcass of Will of Eternity is left hanging in orbit, trailing fumes and corpses into the void. DC 13, Cadian Mortis, Last Stand. The Black Legion's progress has been halted, but the onslaught is far from over. Belisarius Cawl, having arrived from Eriad 6, joins other senior commanders in a council of war. He reveals the nature of the Cadian pylons and preaches their importance to his allies. Lord Castellan Creed orders the immediate fortification of the Elysian Fields, the largest concentration of pylons on Cadia's surface, and surely Abaddon's next target. DC 01, Cadian Mortis, False Victory. The Black Legion commit their remaining forces to battle, this time with Abaddon himself at their head. Across the vast expanse of the Elysian Fields, dozens of battles rage. Howling hordes of demons, mortal cultists, and relentless traitors meet massed cohorts of Citarii, Space Marines, and entrenched Cadian soldiers. Millions more are added to the tally of dead in those final hours of fighting. Eventually, the forces of Chaos are repulsed, Abaddon the Despoiler sorely wounded by Saint Celestine's blade. DC 01, Cadian Mortis, Cadia's Doom. Having withdrawn to his flagship, Vengeful Spirit, Abaddon issues orders to his warpsmiths aboard the drifting ruins of Will of Eternity. On the largest fragment of the fortress's debris, itself the size of a small moon, plasma engines flare to life, propelling the black stone corpse towards Cadia's surface. Its impact gouges a crater hundreds of miles wide into the planet's surface. Oceans are boiled away in an instant, continents cracked asunder or obliterated by raging firestorms. Fleeing vessels are ripped from the skies by raging cyclones, or torn apart by winged demons. Few escape the cataclysm. DC 00, Cadian Mortis, What Remains. The destruction of the Cadian pylons allows tides of empiric corruption to course from the Eye of Terror. Swathed in warp energy, Cadia is transformed into a demon world, and the Cadian Gate is opened wide, the energies of unreality swamping its systems unchecked. DC 00, Post-cadia Mortis, Empiric Influx. Almost simultaneously to the fate of Cadia comes the opening of the Cicatrix Maledictum. This event sees the galaxy and the Imperium split, divided by a chain of interconnected warp storms. Those regions cut off by the Great Rift will come to be known by humanity as the Imperium Nihilus, where the light of the Astronomicon is absent, and the Imperium Sanctus, where the Emperor's guiding beacon still shines. The Eye of Terror sits upon the fault line between the two. DC 02 Plus, Post-cadia Mortis, Staging Ground. Following the collapse of the Cadian Gate, Cadia itself becomes a staging ground for the Despoiler's wider war effort. Drifting chunks of the planet's shattered remains are brought into demon forges, fortresses and orbital star docks trapped in the demon world's unnatural orbit. With Cadia no longer a threat, Abaddon entrusts control of the Cadian system to Iordax Quan, an ambitious lord of the Black Legion whom he judges competent enough to purge the remaining holdouts and quarry what blackstone he can from the world's corpse. The Despoiler turns his attention to seizing control of the Nachmund Gauntlet, one of the only stable warp routes between the Imperium Sanctus and Nihilus. DC 10+, Post-cadia Mortis, a playground for chaos. With Iordax Quan's armies engaged in cleansing the Cadian system of resistance, more Traitor Legion forces spill from the Eye of Terror. Warbands of the Word-bearers converge on shrine worlds and other bastions of the Imperial Creed. Night Lords raiding parties indulge their lust for violence in attacks on isolated outposts, and further heretic warfleets threaten the Tauros, Vendara, and Oleandros systems, amongst others. The Imperium's commanders are forced to draw new battle lines. Already formidable systems such as Bellis Corona and Agrippina are further reinforced, and relative backwaters such as the Shinkare system fortified to resist further incursions. Whilst none of these strongholds can rival Cadia's former power, their beleaguered defenders cling to the desperate hope that they will hold out long enough for the Imperium to send further aid. Traitor Legions. Since the Horus Heresy, the Eye of Terror has been a stronghold of the Traitor Legions. Within, these bitter heretics have waged endless wars of dominion and destruction, striking out to raid imperial worlds and satisfy their desire for vengeance against the Corpse Emperor. Now, with the Cadian Gate shattered and the Eye of Terror opened wide, they are afforded greater opportunity to further their long war. The fall of Cadia and the opening of the Great Rift created countless opportunities for the Traitor Legions. Those warbands who had made their lairs within the Eye of Terror were now able to leave their strongholds and strike at the wider galaxy with far greater ease. Abaddon the Despoiler's Black Legion and those allied to his cause accompanied his armada to Cadia and beyond, playing their part in his grand plan. Others opted to wage their own campaigns against the hated Imperium, striking systems in the immediate vicinity of the Eye of Terror. Having been largely bypassed by Abaddon, the Imperial-held regions in the Cadian Gate and beyond were now subject to constant attacks. Night Lord warbands rampaged through the Sentinel worlds, where they inflicted stomach-turning atrocities upon the doomed populations of near-defenseless planets, leaving only the tattered hides and bleached bones of their victims to attest to the cruelty of the slaughter. Lord Iordax Quan, chosen by the Despoiler to pacify the Cadian system, dutifully turned to crushing remaining resistance on the worlds of Castlehorn and Cantrael. His veteran warriors pressed the beleaguered Imperial forces into ever-reducing pockets, seizing a wealth of manufacturing facilities and military assets they could repurpose to their cause. Deathguard Vectoriums and Thrallbounds of the Thousand Suns sowed plague and corruption far and wide, and their cults dug their claws into the underbellies of the rotting Imperium. Even the heavily fortified Agrippina and Bellis Corona systems were afflicted. The defenders of these linchpin systems were soon pinned down, hard-pressed to repel the continual influx of traitors and tides of demons sweeping from the Eye of Terror. Some amongst the Traitor Legions forfeited the opportunity to lash out against reality, and instead focused their attention on the demon worlds within the Eye of Terror itself. Would-be champions and demonic lords sought to exploit the exodus of their rivals, or to settle grudges centuries in the making. Each such act of treacherous violence was performed with one goal in mind: the gathering of might and power. While such infighting provided temporary relief to beleaguered Imperial forces in the vicinity of the former Cadian Gate, and perhaps prevented their absolute annihilation, such solace would surely be short-lived. The wars waged within the Eye of Terror served to see the weak whittled away and power directed into the hands of the most ruthless. It would only be a matter of time before more puissant warlords emerged from the ashes of these conflicts with sufficient might and ambition to grind the holdouts to dust. I butchered their officer first. I cut him slowly, teasing out the screams as I peeled his flesh. He was a disappointment. His heart failed as I plucked out his eyes, craven and fragile. His guards proved just as pathetic, all rags and bones and rotten teeth, with no heart left for the fight. I pared them too, and split their entrails for the vermin. For long dark hours, the hunt continued. I killed with relish, savouring the screams, drinking deeply of the fear. My brothers too hunted in the darkness, carving their malice into flesh, and spilling blood and entrails in lurid rivers. So died the Emperor's thralls. When at last dawn's light swept away the night, Utolian citizens looked upon the bloodshed and wept. Some clung to the worthless faith, praying for salvation that would not come. In a single night their world had become a canvas for our murderous arts. Its spires writhed with the bodies of the impaled, kept alive to suffer the ignominy and agony of a lingering death. Some bowed and submitted to our absent mercy. Chinker will suffer next. The citizens of Utolian will serve as fodder for that world's guns. Let them clog the tunnels with their corpses. Let them proclaim in fevered screams that the Night Lords come for them, and their doom is nigh. Terramaster Harvak Zul, recounting the Night of Screams. Entry 1144715, Thracian Prime Sector. Status Report, Biobos Offensive. Haramaster Sothes offers an alliance. His agents on Biobos promise a bounty of Promethium. He claims that his forces can deliver Biobos into my hands, and asks only his share of the spoils in return. I do not trust him, of course. The tongues of all Alpharius' sons are forked. There is not a shred of honour amongst them, and yet their methods have a certain merit. If Thracian Primaris itself is to be taken, I can ill afford to suffer further losses. Let the Alpha Legion's mortal thralls bear the brunt. Let them silence the anti-orbital batteries. Then we will fulfill our part of the bargain. We will rip the bleeding heart from this world and seize the glory of victory. Should Sothes and his agents renege upon our deal, should they reveal a shred of treacherous intent, I shall have their heads. Honor Keeper. Our works on Melussoir are near completion. The altar rises from the spine of the world to pierce the heavens. Mortal flesh, bone and sinew fused with demon souls to form a living, screaming beacon of faith. One that shall howl incantations to the heavens and spread the word throughout the Cadian Gate. Yet this hallowed beacon hungers for sacrifices, and no simple mortals will suffice as fuel. I must have psychers. Those trained as astropaths would serve the best, and as many as can be provided. Already we have scoured the Thracian Primaris and Chinkare systems for victims. Bellis Corona has a beautiful supply, and my dark apostles have sown the seeds of treachery amidst the populace. I humbly petition Sicarus for aid. Bring me that which I seek, and I shall bring millions into the dark god's embrace. This I promise. Yours in service of the primordial truth, Aristor Sorgan, Dark Apostle of the 70th Host. Your labours are appreciated, Dark Apostle, and your faith unquestioned. The Keeper of the Faith offers you his blessings and prayers. Your request has been communicated unto him. Rest assured that all efforts will be made to provide you with the sacrifices you require. Further warriors and slave thralls have been dispatched to replenish your forces. Cavik Palistar, Scrivener to the Keeper of Faith. Subject Indent, Malgoris, Lord of Poxes, Master of the Glooming Lords. This is a world ripe for the harvest, brothers. and we of the corpse makers are to be the plague god's reapers. Angelosaur will hum with the wing beats of rot-glutted flies as we break their wills and reduce their fortresses to ruin. The streets of their cities shall run thick with the effluent spill of bloated corpses. When the last of the corpse emperor's thralls lie choking in the Mulcian spoil, toxin peal shall proclaim the wholeness of our victory. The shambling dead will, through febrile lungs, respond with groaning dirge. Only then, when our victory is writ large on the blighted canvas of this wretched place, shall Grandfather Nurgle look down upon the ruin we have wrought, and bless this world with his fecund touch. By his puted grace shall the circle of death and rebirth begin anew. Angelosaur may wither and die, but from its corpse will rise Putredia in all its malodorous glory. How delectable their dead, a frisson of brittle fear carried upon whispering winds. I tasted it from the moment of their arrival. No mistaking that sweet and sickly tang. Eldari, come to play amidst the ruins of their doom, to dance in the haunted manses of their debased forebears. Drawn to the breached bones of lost glory, the warp-geist's hunger. We make haste, lest they beat us to the prey. Oh, the agonies we sons of Fulgrim wrought upon them. The exquisite chorus of screams emitted as we peeled the skin from their delicate forms. Just as I offered their souls to the Dark Prince, so did I feast upon the tender scraps of their flesh, and from them saw a shimmering jewel suspended in the endless void. Ulthwé, what an offering it would be. The gate through which the aliens came is destroyed, broken to prevent its use. For now, the path eludes us, but we will not be deterred. We will stalk the crone worlds of the eye until we find the Xenos hidden paths and break them open. We will find this Ulthwé and experience its wonders. We will slaughter its people, break open its vaults, and carve our names into its wraithbone heart. Then, glutted on such a feast of souls, Slaanesh will surely reward us for our efforts. Mordak, Castellan of Castle Sublime. Sicarus. Should I die in the service of the gods, I demand of you only this: return my reins to holy Sicarus. Let me be buried beneath the corpse plains, that my soul may serve for all eternity. Dark Apostle Kaziel, of the Learned Pilgrims. If the word-bearers can be said to possess a home, then the demon world of Sicarus is it. Here the sons of the demon Primarch Lorgar sought sanctuary in the aftermath of Horus's rebellion. The atmosphere of Sicarus is riven by howling winds and billowing storm clouds through which the light of dying stars trickles. Beneath skies of fire and blood is a surface encrusted with cathedrals, temple complexes, and towering monuments, all dedicated to the ruinous powers. Arachnid demon engines clamber across the spires of those towering structures, their bulbous backs covered in cranes and mobile forges, crewed by teeming masses of mortals and mutants, all slaving under the lash to erect new structures of devotion and worship atop the old. Cathartes, winged skinless demons with humanoid form, roost atop the highest structures, descending in rabid flocks to pluck away the unwary and devour them. The majority of Sicarus's population never so much as gaze upon the infernal majesty of their home, instead condemned to a subterranean existence within this crumbling labyrinth of profanity. Basilica of the Word. Among the largest and most hideous of Sicarus's temple complexes, the Basilica of the Word looms over the surrounding sprawls. It is an immense Gothic cathedral fortress, capped with hundreds of mile-high spires, their barbed peaks impaled with writhing and screaming bodies of sacrificial victims. deep within the temple are the chambers of the Dark Council. In the absence of Lorgar, who has remained isolated for millennia, the Dark Council has taken responsibility for leading the Word-Bearers. They alone have the power to elevate warriors to the position of Dark Apostle. The Templum Inficio. More impressive and terrifying still than even the Basilica of the Word, the Templum Inficio serves as the personal sanctuary of the Word-Bearer's demon Primarch. It rises from a desert of bone and ash, a macabre oasis amidst the endless sprawl of pietistic construction. The soaring shrine is said by the Dark Apostles to have been raised by 8 million adepts, all of whom were sacrificed upon its completion, their blood and entrails used to consecrate the temple stones. For as long as most word-bearers can remember, Lorgar has remained locked away within the Templum Inficio central chambers, forbidding any to disturb his meditations. The Corpse Plains. The corpses of those who achieve the rank of Dark Apostle and die in the course of their duties are treated with a reverence uncommon in the Traitor Legions, where fallen word-bearers of lower rank may have their progenoid glands ripped out, their equipment salvaged, and their remains simply discarded without care. The priesthood of the word-bearers are afforded greater respect. Where possible, their corpses are borne back to Sicarus to be interred within the planet's soil. Most are laid to rest beneath the Corpse Plain, one of the few places on Sicarus untouched by construction. There, so the word-bearers claim, from the blood-drenched soils of that desolate place, the spirits of the dark gods most devoted may be raised to demonic immortality. A wind-swept expanse of tor-studded badlands and fields of coarse razor glass, the Corpse Plain echoes with the wails of tortured spirits who have been found wanting. Those word-bearers who failed the Dark Council are blinded, shorn of their armor, and exiled to walk the plains alone. There they may wander for long centuries, utterly lost and denied the mercy of a swift death. Their broken minds are subjected constantly to the malicious whispers of the vengeful dead, and all the while the Cathartes circle above, screeching and cackling in vicious mockery of these wretched outcasts. Lorentix. The Iron Warriors possess many strongholds within and without the Eye of Terror. Even by the standards of their dread bastions and impenetrable fortresses, the captured world of Lorentix ranks amongst the strongest and most formidable. Located in the Bellis Corona system, the planet Lorentix fell to Perturabo's sons within months of Cada's destruction, and has remained in their iron grip ever since. The entire planet has been mutated into a staging ground for the campaigns of warsmith Gravox. Its tracts of lush jungle have been hewn down, soaring mountains flattened, and its denizens enslaved to supplement the Iron Warriors' wars. On Lorentix, Warmaster Gravox holds sway. Under his command are the greater portion of the Iron Warriors' 73rd Grand Company, a colossal army of conquest hammered forcibly together from a dozen or more warbands and tasked by Perturabo himself with seizing control of the Bellis Corona system. The first of the system's worlds to fall to Gravox's invading fleets, Lorentix has been fortified in the typically blunt style of Perturabo's legion. The planet's crust has been cracked open to release its geothermic energies. Rivers of molten lava stream from dissected volcanoes, their blazing heat fueling demon forges crawling with cowed adepts of the Dark Mechanicum. Metal-skinned demon engines stalk the rad-blasted wilds, running down escaped thralls and hunting feral mutants for sport. Cadian Anchorage. Locked in geostationary orbit above Lorentix's primary continent, Cadian Anchorage is a fortified mass of docking stations, comparable in size to an Imperial starfort, and furnished with equivalent firepower. The city-sized segments from which this colossal structure is formed were crafted in the demon forges of Medrengard, and hauled out of the Eye of Terror before being assembled in orbit. At the station's core dwells an abominable intelligence of impossibly ancient origin, bound at least temporarily by arcane wards and oil and blood rituals. This infernal presence guides the station's servitor crews remotely, keeping them operating at full capacity for countless thousands of hours. This ensures that Icarian anchorage's bays and engravings never cease their toil and can swiftly restore even the most heavily damaged vessel to working order. The operation of the station is overseen by a trio of warpsmiths whose hatred for one another has threatened to boil over into outright violence on many occasions. The malevolent intelligence buried within the bowels of the station strains constantly against its bonds, ever probing at the minds of these overseers, seeking to inflame their rivalries and exploit their mutual loathing to escape its prison. Mons Malefica. On the flattened peak of the largest of Lorentix's volcanic peaks, this network of refineries and fortresses is being constructed using designs of Warsmith Gravox's own specifications. Its walls contain a number of refineries, processing plants and forges, and the heart of a volcano has been transformed into a monstrous demon forge, within which demonic entities are trammelled into forms of adamantine and flesh. Defilers, forge fiends, and all manner of other corrupted engines stalk off the lines daily, to be ferried to waiting vessels above and deployed in the ongoing siege of Bellis Corona's ring of Ramles-class star forts. In the fortress's highest tower is Gravox's strategium, from where the Iron Warrior's commander monitors the progress of his siege. He keeps a careful eye on the movements of his Death Guard, word-bearers and Emperor's Children rivals, each of whom have their own designs upon the system and must be kept in check. Narakir. Fear cuts as deep as the sharpest blade, and wounds just as grievously. Flint's Master Zavrik. Once located deep within the Eye of Terror, the demon world of Narakir was dragged into reality by Warpstorm Buffermail. It now prowls the outer reaches of the Sentinel worlds, and its passage has taken it through many of that region's systems, much to the malicious delight of its Night Lord's inhabitants, who have been afforded opportunities to descend upon these unsuspecting planets and slake their endless thirst for savagery. The canyons and craters that cover much of Narakir's corrupted surface are strewn with the steel skeletons of hundreds, if not thousands, of crashed void ships. Amidst this graveyard of twisted steel, slavering fiends and tribes of mutated beastmen wage endless wars over the meagre scraps they pluck from the detritus. From the midst of the sea of misery rise many craggy plateaus, their tops obscured by choking clouds of pollutants spilled from the destroyed vessels as they moulder and decay. It is here, above the carrion plains and far from the prying eyes of mere mortals, that the demon world's true masters reside, and from whence the pained screams of tortured prey are carried on biting winds. Vilespar. Atop the largest of Narakir's Table Mountains, swathed in static storms, stands the sky-piercing Vilespar, dread bastion of Flint's Master Zavrik of the Night Lords. Carved from solid obsidian, its lightning-wreathed ramparts are hung with spiked gibbets, in which are imprisoned flayed captives, kept alive by Zavrik's malign sorcery. These prisoners scream endlessly, their wails of agony and despair echoing from fortress walls. Zavrik makes his lair in the fortress's uppermost chambers, in gore-plastered galleries daubed with blood and draped with peeled faces of his most recent victims. Animated by his twisted magics, these hideous artworks twist and writhe, constantly forming into taut expressions of anguish and abject fear. When Zavrik and his warband, Zavrik's Flayers, go to war, these haunted visages are borne aloft as banners, inspiring a paralyzing fear in the Night Lord's victims. Skadric Landing. A ramshackle city contained within the gutted hull of a gargantuan kin vessel, Skadric Landing is the only place on Narakir where the meagre mortal populace gather in number. Those that eke out a living here are a combination of void-wrecked survivors of all species and captive thralls of the Night Lords, mutated by exposure to the mutagenic energies of the Immaterium and the radioactive chemicals that leak and pool throughout the graveyards. Even in this place of supposed shelter, life is cheap and bloodshed never ceases. Murder, torture, and cruelty are the true constants. Only the most depraved and brutal survive, and this has served to turn Scadric's Landing into an excellent recruitment ground for the Night Lords. Those youths who demonstrate sufficient strength and depravity may be selected to undergo the agonizing surgeries and indoctrinations required to transform them into Space Marines. Those too old or weak to be granted such an honor may still serve, however. Even the lowliest of Scadric Landing's denizens is an inveterate scoundrel and killer, and these wretched beings provide a necessary supply of cannon fodder for Zavric's raids. The residents know well when such an offensive looms, for such a mustering will see squads of raptors descending from Valspar's eyries to gather a tithe of mortal killers to supplement their master's forces. The Hydra Vault. Established by the Whispering Serpents, an Alpha Legion warband, the Hydra Vault is a repository of stolen knowledge, sorcerous relics, and invaluable intelligence that has remained hidden beneath the nose of the Imperium for decades. In contrast to their traitorous cousins, many Alpha Legion warbands were never reliant upon the Eye of Terror for sanctuary. Gifted in the arts of stealth, infiltration, and misdirection, they instead opted to melt away into the fabric of the wider Imperium, establishing hidden bastions across the breadth of the galaxy with a particular concentration of strength in the eastern fringe. The Legion's warbands do, however, retain a number of outposts in the Segmentum Obscurus. One such holdfast is the Hydra Vault, buried far beneath the surface of Vancella's world, an uninhabited planet of the Chinkari system. Originally a classified outpost of the Ordo Xenos, this sprawling facility is concealed deep beneath the planet's oceans, infiltrated and seized by the Whispering Serpents more than a century prior to the fall of Cadia. It provided its conquerors with an abundance of esoteric knowledge and a trove of alien technologies, specimens, and weapons. Many of these have been put to good use by the Vault's conquerors. In addition, captured clearance codes and forged inquisitorial seals have enabled mortal agents of the Whispering Serpents to infiltrate the governments and command structures of a number of neighboring worlds and systems, preparing the groundwork for further campaigns and fomenting rebellion amongst populations. The Hydra Vault is more akin to a hidden safe house than a true fortress. Its sprawling sub-oceanic chambers rarely play host to more than a handful of Alpha Legionnaires at any one time, and its external defenses are limited. The Vault's true value is as a command center and repository of knowledge, the accumulated libraries of which will surely be put to use against the Imperium and may well hold upon their shelves the key to conquering the Chinkari system. The Pyrus Nebula. Located inside the mouth of the Eye of Terror, the Pyrus Nebula serves as one of the Black Legion's many strongholds and a concealed sanctuary for their massive fleets. The Pyrus Nebula is one amongst a cluster of overlapping stellar dust clouds that lie just within the fringe of the Eye of Terror. Long dominated by the Black Legion and favoured for the concealment and sanctuary it offers, the Pyrus Nebula served as a staging point for a number of Abaddon's Black Crusades. Within the nebula's dust clouds, a dozen demon worlds orbit one another in erratic fashion, each the domain of a mighty demon lord. Once, these worlds were 13 in number. The last of them, formerly the primary garrison of the Death Guard warlord Zulgix Grawl, was a casualty of the Legion War. Shattered by Abaddon's fleets during the dying days of that ancient conflict, its broken core has since been resurrected and transformed into a colossal shipyard and refueling station to serve the War Master's fleets. This world, named Bassitar by its occupants, is watched over by Abaddon's champions and has become a primary destination for those who wish to swear themselves to the Spoiler's Legion, particularly warriors of fellow traitor legions. Any seeking acceptance must traverse the augur-baffling energies of the nebula and weave their way through its roaming celestial bodies. There they are subjected to the whispered promises of demons, all of whom seek to sway them from their course with tempting offers of power and immortality. Those who reach Basseterre unscathed are met with further tests of their strength and loyalty. The trials they must undergo vary widely. Some are required to brave the nebulous rogue planets and to defeat demonic champions, or to recover cursed artifacts from radiation-saturated warpscapes. Others may be forced to prove their ruthlessness by sacrificing their brothers, or engaging in duels to the death with champions of the Dark Guards. Many of those who journey to the Pyrus Nebula meet only with damnation, yet those that survive their deadly trials and who swear fealty to the Despoiler provide his armies with much-needed strength to replenish their inevitable losses. The Iron Warriors. Origins. Originally founded as the Emperor's Fourth Legion, the Iron Warriors fought for the Imperial cause during the Great Crusade, before becoming embroiled in the Primarch Horus's rebellion. Following his defeat and flight into the Eye of Terror, all remaining Iron Warriors were declared excommunicate traitors, Legion organization. The Iron Warriors retain far greater unity than many of their fellow traitor legions, and the overarching command structure present during the latter days of the Horus heresy has largely persisted. The Legion's warriors are divided into grand companies, each led by a warsmith. These grand companies would, at one time, have been roughly similar in structure, totaling approximately 1,000 Space Marines. Now, however, they vary greatly in size and strength. The warsmiths who lead the grand companies are experienced commanders all, gifted in combat engineering as well as strategy, and capable of overseeing siege operations on a grand scale. They are aided and attended to by retinues of warpsmiths and mechanician thralls who perform menial tasks and oversee the construction of fortifications on their behalf. The organization of the extant grand companies, the number of which is likely unknown to all save perhaps Perturabo, is far from uniform. Most are divided into detachments of varying size and speciality, each led by lesser champions. Alongside legionaries, who form the bulk of the fighting strength, the Iron Warriors deploy large numbers of obliterators and mutilators. These units are favored for their destructive capacity and resilience, assets that are extremely useful when engaging in the siege warfare in which the Legion excels. Recruitment. The Iron Warriors obtain the majority of their recruits from the war zones in which they operate. Those taken, willingly or unwillingly, are returned to Medrengard, where they must endure a series of physical and psychological ordeals designed to push them to their limits and determine their suitability. The attrition rate amongst these new recruits is astonishingly high, yet the Iron Warriors are never short of new captives and volunteers. Only the most ruthless, resilient, and intelligent meet the exacting standards of the warsmiths and are selected to ascend into the ranks of a grand company. Spiritual beliefs. The Iron Warriors acknowledge and honor the dark gods of chaos, but are not given to devout worship of any power. Their veneration of divine beings is purely transactional. If they could be said to have any loyalty, it would be to Perturabo, who they believe saved them from being sacrificed by the false emperor. Gene Seed. The influence of the warp and their embrace of chaos has certainly corrupted the gene seed of the Iron Warriors, but it remains far more stable and plentiful than that of other traitor legions. Whether genetic, cultural, or the result of empiric corruption, the Legion's warriors do have a tendency towards paranoia, a flaw that they share with their demon Primarch. The Iron Warriors do, however, display extreme intelligence and an exceptional talent for problem-solving, even in comparison to other Space Marines. This mental acuity is buttressed by extreme physical and psychological fortitude, attributes that Perturabo demands from every one of his gene sons. Combat Doctrine. The Iron Warriors have always favored a deceptively simple form of warfare. In the Legion's earliest campaigns, long prior to their descent into heresy, offensive actions were preceded by sustained orbital or conventional artillery bombardment, utilizing all available guns. Only when the defenses of the foe were appropriately softened did the Iron Warriors commit the bulk of their forces to battle. Since their embrace to Horus's cause and their flight into the Eye of Terror, the Legion's Grand Companies and warbands have been forced to adapt their strategies. Lacking the abundant resources with which they were once furnished, Perturabo's sons now make considerable use of wave attacks by teaming masses of cultists and Imperial turncoats to drain enemy munition, clear minefields and force breaches that can be exploited. Should the foe prove particularly obstinate, more valuable assets such as demon engines and heavy armor may be deployed en masse, supported by squads of disciplined and motivated legionaries. Neither do the Iron Warriors have any compunction as regards to the use of sorcery and the summoning of demons, should the situation demand. Such infernal combined arms assaults see enemy fortifications broken apart with methodical precision. When on the defensive, Perturabo's sons demonstrate their skill in the arts of siegecraft, establishing interlocking networks of fortifications that enable them to tie down their enemy with as few warriors as possible. This strategy serves to keep the bulk of Iron Warriors' troops fresh and available for counter-assaults as and when the opportunity arises. Battle cry. The Iron Warriors are not given to bellicose exclamations. However, the Legion motto, "Iron within, iron without," is often chanted in the heat of battle, always droning and monotonous in tone. Iron Warriors, tyrants of Medrengard, masters of grinding attritional warfare. The Iron Warriors excel in the planning and execution of sieges and the raising of dead bastions. Consumed by bitterness and envy, they and their demon primarch, Perturabo, are utterly determined to demonstrate their superiority and eclipse their cousin legions in grand campaigns of galactic conquest. The coming of the Great Rift and the dawning of the era Indomitus ushered in a new age of warfare on a galactic scale. The Imperium quivered under the strain of countless conflicts. Its martial strength stretched as never before in its increasingly desperate attempts to hold back the tide of chaos that threatened to devour it. This bubbling cauldron of ceaseless conflict was a gift to Perturabo, who saw amidst the confusion and bloodshed an opportunity to right past wrongs and prove his intellectual and martial superiority over his brother Primarchs. From the moment of Cadia's fall, the grand companies of the Iron Warriors struck out into the fractured Imperium, exploiting the chaos and confusion to prosecute a multitude of campaigns across many regions of the galaxy. Grand Companies. During the Horus Heresy, the Iron Warriors were a rigidly ordered and organized legion. Their Grand Companies were each huge mechanized armies which comprised several companies of Space Marines supported by Dark Mechanicum assets and sprawling formations of auxiliary soldiers. By Millennium 41, the Grand Companies had diverged greatly, becoming less uniform of construction and displaying great variation in fighting strength, equipment, and methods of warfare. The largest of the Grand Companies can call upon dozens of void ships, hundreds of traitor legionaries, and countless thousands of followers, ranging from experienced and capable turncoat Imperial Guard to teeming masses of insane cultists whose primary value is as cannon fodder to drain the enemy of ammunition and open routes of assault for their masters. Wrath of Iron. Centuries of observation, reconnaissance, probing raids, and the capture and interrogation of loyalists have allowed the Iron Warriors to gather invaluable strategic insight. Mutually beneficial alliances were forged with elements of the Alpha Legion. Infernal pacts were sealed with demonic entities, most notably Vashtor the Archiphane, whose weird djinns and cacosparks returned to Perturabo a bounty of crucial data, from Imperial defense codes to sector fleet deployments, rotations, and dispositions. Whilst Perturabo remained ensconced within the heart of his fortress on Medrengard, Processing said information, plotting methods of attack, and mustering his armies, the warsmiths of the Grand Companies were free to wage war according to their own whims. Warsmith Kazagra, invited by Abaddon to seize control of an Ark of Omen, successfully bent the vessel in question, Herald of Misery, to his will. The interior of this colossal spaceborne fortress was transformed into a labyrinthine tangle of defences, both technological and sorcerous, impervious to all but the most determined and overwhelming of boarding actions. Honouring a bargain sworn by the Warmaster of Chaos, Kazagra struck at the shrine world of Lume IV. There the warsmith and his Grand Company engaged the world's formidable garrison, repelled a reef force of blood angels, and seized an arcane artifact sought by the despoiler. Subsequently freed from his obligations to the Black Legion, Kazagra turned his attention to the worlds of the Red Scar, hopeful of exploiting the aftermath of High Fleet Leviathan's invasion to inflict further misery upon the sons of Sanguinius. There he has continued to engage Tyranids and Space Marines alike in successive battles, bludgeoning a course towards the star systems of the Arcanis Shear, which are yet to be fully devoured by the Tyranid menace. Meanwhile, in the galactic core, warsmith Baldermort and his sworn ally, the renegade Abriel Shard, carved out a base of operations within the Cadian Trinary. This trio of nebulae, formed following the eruption of Warpstorm Orgavir by the simultaneous supernovae of trinary stars, had torn open rifts in the fabric of reality from which the Iron Warriors were able to strike the border regions of the Great Arthurian League. By the time the kin were able to mount a response, Baldermort and Shard's warriors, collectively known as Abrael's Claw, had overrun several kindreds, firmly entrenched their forces, and were well prepared for a protracted and wasteful war of the sort abhorred by their foes. Those kindreds whose fanes had been overrun and despoiled by the invaders swore vengeance, forming grudge bands to scour Abrael's Claw from the ruins of their fallen homes, while the Carls of the Great Thurian League despaired at the unfolding slaughter. Baldermort and Abrael revelled in the gore-drenched spectacle of the conflict, knowing that each act of bloodshed was an offering to the ruinous powers and an irresistible lure to the demonic forces of the Dark Gods. In the western reaches of the Ultima Segmentum, warsmith Melek Ugor, lord of the 45th Grand Company, set his sights upon the formidable fortress of Althes. Hoping to raise himself up in the estimations of his demon Primarch, he flooded Althes's layered defences with masses of mortal cultists, observing their fruitless onslaught on the loyalist bastions from above, using the deaths of these expendable masses to identify weaknesses in the planet's fortifications. A punishing bombardment followed, succeeded by a ground assault led by a vanguard of demon engines, mutilators and obliterators that advanced over mountains of the dead and punched holes in the dense network of fortresses surrounding the capital's planet. Ugor's personal land raider, Obdurate Will, spearheaded an armoured assault on the gubernatorial district. The warsmith's armour squadrons ground their way to within a few hundred yards of their target, only halted when Space Marines of the Subjugators and Crimson Fists arrived in force to engage the Iron Warriors' fleet and stymie the warsmith's assault. The Loyalists paid a terrible price for their victory, however, with fully half of the city reduced to a smouldering ruin. Even with the aid of Space Marine reinforcements, the odds of holding out against the Iron Warriors' determined onslaught appeared vanishingly small. Eye of Medrengard. On Medrengard, Perturabo has, for many centuries, distanced himself from his legion. For millennia he has remained content to allow his warsmiths to wage their own campaigns of conquest, to raid imperial worlds and crush Xenos interlopers, to engage in internecine struggles for dominance, and to build their strength and swell their armies with an endless stream of mortal thralls and twisted demon engines. As the centuries passed, the weakest of his sons were whittled away, and only the most obdurate, cunning, and resourceful survived. As this bloody process unfolded, the demon Primarch set his mind to plotting further conquests, ensuring that, when the opportune time arrived, the Iron Warriors would be ready to strike a telling blow against their foes. Medrengard. The infernal sanctuary and adoptive homeworld of the Iron Warriors. Medrengard is a demonic warpscape, a monument to infernal industry and eternal warfare whose barren surface is encrusted with smouldering demon forges and sky-scraping fortresses that rise from the shadows of blackened mountain peaks. The land masses of Medrengard are impossibly bleak. Beyond the cities and fortresses, where captive thralls and blank-faced servitors toil in increasing misery to forge weapons and ammunition for their transhuman masters. There is little sign of life. Endless expanses of desolate ashen desert are split by bubbling rivers of molten lava. Suspended like a blotted stain upon the oppressive canvas of the demon world's white sky is a single black star. This hideous orb casts no light, instead drawing life and vitality away from Medrengard's surface. Those mortals who walk too long under its malicious glare soon find themselves drained of their life force. Threads of infernal smoke trail from the star's black heart and pierce the atmosphere, intertwining with the plumes of pollutants expelled by the Iron Warriors' ever-burning forges. All manner of monstrous creatures and tortured constructs haunt the wilds, many the results of the Iron Warriors' macabre experimentations. Formed of warped flesh and twisted metal, these shambling predatory creatures are constantly racked with spiritual and physical pain, driven by inescapable hunger and burning desire to vent their self-pitying malice upon mortal victims. The largest and most imposing of Medrengard's forged citadels are those of the Warsmiths. Each is a testament to its master's might, raised to the heavens through the suffering of 1,000,000 nameless slaves. These hideous bastions of blackened metal make few concessions to artistry, favouring functional forms that are nonetheless utterly horrifying in their unstinting brutalism. They are erected only with function in mind, thick-walled, soaring monstrosities, ringed by layered defences and labyrinthine networks of interconnected turrets and bunkers intended to dissuade rivals from taking up arms against their architects. The tallest of their spires breach Medrengard's atmosphere. Around them, the corrupted void ships of the grand companies gather like roosting avians, tethered by umbilical cables as they await repair, recruiting, or refitting for impending campaigns. It is in the uppermost levels of these fortresses that the Iron Warriors themselves dwell, rarely deigning to travel to Medrengard's surface and sully themselves by mixing with the mortal masses who slave and toil on their behalf. Over the course of many millennia, thousands such fortresses have been constructed by ascendant warsmiths, only to be razed to the ground by victorious challengers, and yet grander and more intimidating citadels built atop their corpse-strewn ruins. The Colossicon. The grandest of all Medrengard's fortifications, Atrocities, is a sprawling industrial city nestled in a valley between parallel spine-formed mountain ranges, the peaks of which radiate pure malice. A handful of narrow passes lead through the mountains and into the dark, smoke-veiled city beyond. Turret weapons rise from the outer slopes of the mountains, keeping a silent vigil. Domed structures line the streets, and mortal denizens shuffle silently in the shadows of towering demonic figures, emaciated and bloodied by their endless toil. At the very heart of the city, rising from an onyx isle amidst a lake of molten lava, rises Perturabo's sanctuary and strategium, the so-called Colossicon. Behind this structure's yardstick walls, far from the prying eyes of mere mortals, endless streams of data flow constantly through the Colossicon's monolithic cogitator banks. Information such as this, whether returned to Medrengard by the warsmiths and their grand companies, torn from the minds of captives, obtained through fleeting alliances with Alpha Legion infiltrators, divined through the cryptic prophecies of sorcerers, or hissed by malicious demons, is ruthlessly interrogated, purged by cogitator-leashed cyber-thralls for days on end, the filtered output fed to Perturabo's central sanctum. There the demon Primarch pores over an endless influx of statistics and field reports, simultaneously engaging in psychic communion with distant agents and engaging in battles of will with demonic entities as he interprets, quantifies, and extrapolates. The cables attached to his cranium twitch and writhe as he applies that which he has learned, devoting a portion of his formidable intellect to the task of plotting future offences. A million such plans he has formed and discarded as imperfect or impractical. Now the Primarch stirs from his reverie with a vigour not seen in centuries, issuing orders to his warsmiths for a new mustering of Medrengard's strength. Finally, the sons of Perturabo hope their demon Primarch's labours may be nearing an end. Pirifon. The Hellforges of Pirifon comprise a cluster of subterranean foundries, sweltering manufactorums and infernal production lines churning out all manner of demonic material. Under the watch of stern and unforgiving warpsmiths and dark magi, chained captives toil to shape steel and adamantine into shell casings, weapons, and armoured plates, the skin scorched and blistering by the searing heat. Here too, in sigil-scribed summoning chambers, the Legion's masters of possession perform their macabre arts of summoning and binding, the stench of sulphur and brimstone lingering in the hot and fetid air. Mistrusted by many Iron Warriors due to their unflinching devotion to the Dark Gods, they are nonetheless tolerated by Perturabo for their ability to trammel empiric entities and aid in the production of demonic engines on an industrial scale. The Masters of Possession are aided in their profane artifice by the Iron Warriors' warpsmiths and specialist cyberthurges, sorcerers with a gift for binding and enslaving cyber-demonic entities. Pooling their expertise, these masters of the dark arts of techno-sorcery, who constructed many unique and devastating demon engines, and moulded countless virulent technological contagions to unleash upon the galaxy. Such is the scale and efficacy of Pirifon's infernal industry, and the boundless ingenuity of its overseers, that even the most renowned of Dark Mechanicum Hellforges would struggle to match its output. Warsmiths. Warsmith is an ancient title dating back to before the days of the Legion's corruption. Rather than serving simply as battlefield leaders, warsmiths were expected to be masterful strategists with a gift for logistics and siegecraft. Subjected to Perturabo's unforgiving scrutiny, those who failed in their duties were swiftly culled. This served to weed out the weak and ineffectual, as well as fostering ambitions and rivalries amongst the Demon Primarch's most capable sons that have been intensified by the Legion's corruption. The warsmiths of Millennium 41 are tyrannical monsters who have doubtless butchered dozens of rivals in order to attain their positions and rule their grand companies with an iron fist, always wary of challengers to their positions. Perturabo, Lord of Iron. Perturabo is a demon Primarch of the Iron Warriors Traitor Legion. He is bitter resentment and calculated cruelty given infernal form, a master of unholy machinery, a savant of siegecraft, and the living wellspring for the void-cold vitriol that runs through his gene son's veins. Perturabo is a creature of long-tended hatred, who has never forgiven nor forgotten a single slight in all the drawn-out bitter millennia of his existence. Perturabo's pivotal role in the Siege of Terror during the last days of the Horus Heresy has been expunged from records or lost to time. He was offered the prize his jealous soul desired above all else, a chance to humble the defences built by the Imperial Fist's Primarch, Rogel Dawn, and in so doing, to prove that he, not his fated brother, was a master of siege warfare. Perturabo has long brooded upon how the chance was stolen from him by the warp-tainted War Master and his demonic allies. It is the nature of the Empyrean to draw forth and give physical shape to the obsessions of sentient beings. Perturabo has languished in its tides for many mortal lifespans, and the very essence of his demonic form is a grotesque blending of the Emperor's genetic alchemy with the raw stuff of chaos. As such, he has come to physically embody all-consuming rancor and resentment. So withering is Perturabo's contempt that lesser life forms exposed to his corporeal manifestation wilt as though before the open fire of an atomic reactor. Wherever the Lord of Iron prowls, clouds of scalding steam and bitter smoke billow into being. Within them, half-seen, churning mechanisms of bladed cogs said to be the manifestation of Perturabo's endless and obsessive analysis of every failure, insult and disappointment he has suffered. Mortals who have endured the Lord of Iron's presence speak in hushed whispers, of eyes like glowing coals that weighed their worth and found them miserably wanting, and of a looming presence like a barely glimpsed avalanche about to crash down on them in wrath. The demon Primarch's voice is said to be the pounding sound of artillery fire and the pounding of forged hammers. His breath is the crackle of bone beneath tank tracks and the roar of flamers pouring fire through breached fortress walls. Perturabo has been monstrously altered by the gifts of the ruinous powers. Yet in one way, the Lord of Iron remains unchanged. He still obsesses over the triumph that should have been his on Terra. A part of his labyrinthine intelligence forever refined and perfecting insane plans by which he might return to claim that which was denied him once before. With the coming of the Great Rift and the fracturing of the Cadian Gate, the time to put those plans into motion has finally arrived. The Infinite Citadel. In the aftermath of the Noctis Aeterna, the Lord of Iron unleashed scores of warbands across the Segmentum Obscurus. Some were little more than brigands, turncoat Astra Militarum, or cultists who often died to achieve their aims. Others were larger and more focused forces, companies of Iron warriors supported by Chaos Knights, Dark Mechanicum Covens and, at a few key locations, even Traitor Titans. In the wake of Cadia's fall, surviving Imperial forces retreated to strongholds in neighbouring systems and desperately sought to brace the sagging fringes of the Cadian Gate against Chaos warbands and Xenos raiding parties rampaging at will. Perturabo's armies assailed them all. Individually, their efforts appeared mere acts of spite, localized conquests and vengeance strikes. In truth, they were the opening moves in a sprawling, intricate plan conceived by Perturabo over thousands of years. The Lord of Iron has come to view the Imperium in terms of a single galactic fortress, whose innermost keep is the Imperial Palace on Terra. To him, the shattering Cadian system is the first meaningful breach forced into the fortress's outer wall by the upstart first captain of Horus's failed legion. The Great Rift, meanwhile, serves as a potent contravallation to hold the might of half the Emperor's realm at bay while the advance on Terra begins. That advance will not be a headlong charge. Perturabo is aware of Abaddon's long-harboured ambition to force a crimson path towards the throne world, and he scorns it just as he scorned Horus's swift push towards Terra 10,000 years ago. To Perturabo's mind, such plans are rash, doomed to overextend lines of supply and communication and, ultimately, to be surrounded and annihilated by the ponderous but monolithic might of the Imperium. Instead, Perturabo aims to raise what he names the Infinite Citadel. The Lord of Iron has penned insanity-blasting detail the blueprints for a network of interlocking interstellar fortifications whose full scale and complexity defy mortal comprehension. He sees entire worlds turned into keeps, moons made into barbicans bristling with city-sized demonic artillery. He envisions entire systems quarried to rubble to build ramparts so immense they stretch through the veil of the warp itself to span the colossal gulfs between stars. In Perturabo's mind, the Infinite Citadel expands outward from the Eye of Terror to dominate and oppress system after system, world after world. It bulldozes its way through the lightless void, relentless and mercilessly methodical, caging stars and fortifying entire conquered subsectors one after another. Battle by battle, it works its way towards Terra, not in a rush, but with infinite patience, and while leaving no foe to the rear or flank that might sour Perturabo's plans. The bloodshed in each cataclysmic campaign will serve as offerings to the dark gods, while Noctilith Menhirs raised amidst the ruins will harness the power of the Great Rift and permit the mightiest demons, the demon primarchs, to walk the ways of the infinite citadel at will. When eventually this infernal network grinds its way into the fringes of the Sol system, it will have bound real space and the warp together with chains of iron, and throttled Terra so completely with hostile siege works that Perturabo will already have won. It begins with the Segmentum Obscurus and what remains of the Cadian Gate, and it begins now. The bones of our enemies shall form the foundations of our most glorious triumph. Perturabo, Lord of Iron, Demon Primarch of the Iron Warriors. Cravec Mourn, Architect of Ruin. Warsmiths form the senior command echelons of the Iron Warriors. Each leads their own grand company and typically specializes in a particular facet of warfare, be it constructing supernaturally enhanced fortifications, raining death on the foe with massed artillery, or leading devastating armored spearheads. Cravec Mourn's specialism lies in the brute fury of headlong, gate-shattering, rampart-toppling assaults. Cravec Mourn stands out as an unrepentant monster, even amongst the callous and barbarous ranks of the Iron Warriors. Forcibly recruited during the scouring of Kotos by the apothecaries of Warsmith Court, he has served Perturabo with fanatical devotion for almost 2 millennia. For 1.5 of these, he has held the title of Warsmith and has brutally crushed any who challenge his position. Mourn has razed scores of mighty fortresses to the ground, indiscriminately slaughtered countless foes, and, at the head of the 17th Grand Company, reduced entire civilizations to scorched earth in his demon Primarch's name. Not for nothing has he earned the moniker Architect of Ruin. It is not, of course, that Mourn knows nothing of building fortifications or arranging defenses. One does not become a warsmith without mastering these skills, and he has used them to great effect when the need has arisen. It is simply that the Architect of Ruin knows there is no redoubt he cannot sunder, and that this is as true of those fortifications raised by his rival warsmiths as it is of the defences of his Imperial or Xenos foes. To his mind, only the fortifications built by his demon Primarch will stand eternal. All else is merely rubble and ruin waiting to happen. Warsmith Mourn has focused so long upon the most ferocious and direct aspects of siege warfare that he's become a living siege weapon in his own right. A hulking warrior of corded muscles and infernal augmetics, Mourn wears an adapted suit of cataphractii Terminator plate that he calls his Iron Mantle. The additional systems and weaponized mechadandrils of this formidable carapace are advanced enough to require a mind impulse unit to regulate. Caring nothing for trophies or embellishment, Mourn has repaired and augmented his Iron Mantle over the centuries to ensure its faultless operation, but only rarely gives thought to reapplying its battered heraldry. He wields the monstrous Thunderhammer Last Argument, a weapon of Mourn's own masterful craft, whose Archaeotech power pack discharges a crack like shattering stonework. A blow from this malevolent weapon can pulverize the mightiest foe or sunder adamantine-sheathed fortress gates with equal contemptuous ease. So equipped, Cravec Mourn leads his grand company into battle wherever Perturabo commands. He is a blunt instrument with nothing of subtlety about him, and yet within his narrow field of strategic expertise, he is an undisputed genius. If the enemy's defenses have a weakness, no matter how slight or well hidden, Mourn will identify and exploit it. He can predict his foes' overlapping fields of fire to a precise tolerance and has a sixth sense for ambushes and traps. This said, no amount of minefields, hurricane firestorms, and lurking foes will prevent Mourn from driving his attack home by the most direct vector. The Warsmith holds nothing but contempt for those who sidestep peril when they could simply endure and prevail. Further, his expertise allows him to precisely direct preparatory bombardments, deploy expendable underlings and luckless allies to absorb the enemy's attacks, and lead his iron warriors through the fire and fury to smash the foe's defences wide open. The shock value of such onslaughts can shatter enemy morale, spreading panic through the foe's lines as they witness their best efforts and most impregnable defences shouldered aside by the implacable iron warriors. At such moments, Cravec Mourn is truly in his element, bludgeoning a red path of ruin through his terrified foes and stamping the indelible mark of Medrengard upon another battlefield. Bane of Agrippina. Perturabo despises all mortal beings, and his own gene-sons are no exception. However, the demon Primarch's bitter nature does not prevent him from recognizing the usefulness of his underlings. Each of the Legion's warsmiths has his part to play in the raising of the infinite citadel, some more important than others. Having proven himself a ruthless and exceptionally capable leader, Cravec Mourn has been entrusted by the Lord of Iron with one of the most pivotal campaigns of the first phase of his plan, namely the advance through the sundered Cadian Gate and on to conquer Forge World Agrippina. It is a crusade that Mourn has pledged himself to with relish, for his 17th Grand Company have clashed many times with Agrippina's warclades and not always had the best of the engagement. Mourn might not prize trophies or self-aggrandizing glory, but he has learned well from his gene-sire how to nurse a grudge. Driven by the desire to humble the proud and powerful Forge World, and furnished with a mighty void-faring host to support his Grand Company on campaign, Cravec Mourn has sworn to see Perturabo's will done, or die in the attempt. The Adamant Eternals. Competition is fierce within the 17th Grand Company for a position amongst Cravec Mourn's Terminator bodyguard, the Adamant Eternals. Favouring breaching armaments such as power fists and heavy flamers, these elite warriors take pride in their ability to endure all that their master does, no matter the odds. Many allow their battle plate to become scarred and scorched as a mark of the many siege actions they have survived, though of course, such degradation is only superficial. Mourn expects his honour guard to personally maintain all of their war gear and ensure its unfailing efficiency in battle. Mourn and his Adamant Eternals typically ride to war aboard a formation of land raiders led by the venerable war engine Harpaxus, their attack supported by packs of obliterators and mutilators. So ironclad is Mourn's will that even these iron warriors obey his commands, while for his part, the warsmith thinks nothing of expending their lives to achieve his ends.